Hello and welcome to Fairy Tales for Wood Scientists. Today we are reading a story about building a house. Do you remember the story about the three little pigs? It is an English fairy tale, so apparently it happened here in the UK. There were three little pigs, and each of them wanted to build a house. The first one made its house from straw, the second one built it from timber, and the third one from bricks. It didn't take the first pig long to complete its straw house, and when it was sitting inside drinking tea, it heard a voice from the door.
"Hello, is the homeowner present?"
"Yes, I'm inside. Who is there?" answered the little pig.
"It's the wolf. Open up."
The voice from outside was heard. The little pig was scared for a second, but then it replied, "That can't be. Wolves went extinct in this area in the 18th century.
"Haha, yes, you caught me. I was only kidding," said the voice. "It's the building regulations officer, and I'm afraid your dwelling is violating Article 1.2.0 of the Scottish Building Handbook."
Now it was time for the little pig to be afraid again. Never in its life had it heard about the Scottish Building Handbook, not to mention Article 1.2.0. But now that it put some thought into it, indeed, a house made entirely out of straw was not very well embraced against rain or wind or decay. In fact, the little pig even had a piece of the windowsill for lunch itself. While the little pig was too shocked to reply, the voice outside continued to cite parts of the regulations that the straw house was allegedly violating.
"The design and construction of buildings should take into account all contributing factors such as loadings, climatic conditions, partial safety factors for materials and loadings, the design methodology to ensure that there is an acceptable probability that the building will not collapse, open bracket, ultimate limit state, closing bracket, during its design lifetime. Buildings should be designed so that they are robust, which is defined in BSEN 1991-1-7 from 2006 as the ability of a structure to withstand events like fire explosions, impact, or the consequences of human error without being damaged to an extent disproportionate to the original cause."
"What does that mean?" screeched the little pig anxiously.
"I am afraid your house might collapse," said the voice outside.
But my little house is robust," yelled the pig. I built it with my own hands, and it's standing here. It's stable, it's straight, and perfectly fine for me to live in," it added, gaining confidence from the undeniable fact that its house was indeed standing, although not entirely stable or straight.
"Pardon me, but I dare to doubt the stability of this dwelling," the building regulations officer exclaimed. "Did you seek the advice from approved certifiers of design, chartered engineers, or other appropriately qualified persons, or can you prove yourself that there isn't any doubt about the loads acting on the building or how these loads are accommodated by the structure and safely transmitted to the ground?"
The confidence of the little pig vanished as fast as it had come. After all, it was a talented builder, but it didn't hold any official qualifications, and to be frank, it hadn't bothered doing any calculations on the load-bearing capacity of its house. The silence from inside the dwelling provoked a little giggle from the building regulations officer, and he stated, "I bet if I huffed and I puffed, I could even provoke a disproportional collapse, so that the area of collapse within this story and the immediately adjacent stories is greater than 15% of the floor area, or 100 square meters, whichever is greater." The ongoing silence from inside revealed that his attempt on a joke had failed, so he added, "Which would be a violation of Article 1.2.3 of the Scottish Building Handbook." This was too much for the little pig. Before even sparing another thought about what to do, it ran out of the back door of its little straw house and ran as far as its little legs would carry it. When it finally slowed down, it found itself next to the house of its older sibling. The second little pig had built its house entirely from timber, and it looked a lot more stable than the straw house. Still shaking in distress, the first pig knocked on the door and was welcomed promptly by its sibling. They sat down to have some chamomile tea that calms the nerves, while the first pig described the horrible encounter with the government official. The second pig was very understanding and offered its younger sibling to stay in its house for a while. The timber building was big enough after all. It had 3 stories and a pitched roof with an attic for storage. The first little pig was very impressed by the skilled crafts-pigship that went into the construction. The house made a very safe and stable impression, so the first little pig started to relax and forget about the incidents of the morning. But just a few moments later, the 2 little pigs heard a voice from outside. "Hello? Is the homeowner present?" "Who's there?" asked the second little pig, while the first pig went pale as a sheet and shrieked, "It's him! It's the building regulations officer!" "Haha, yes, that's correct," said the voice from outside. "Is that so?" asked the second little pig, determined to sound confident and to show its little sibling that they had nothing to fear. "Well, my timber house is very stable and safe. I'm sure we would have no problem to provide proof of that." "Yes!" screeched the first pig. "You can huff and you can puff as much as you want. This house will not give in." "Oh, I don't doubt the load-bearing capacity of this structure. This magnificent example of timber frame construction seems to be a masterpiece of joinery work. Too bad that you will need to demolish it." "Demolish?" shrieked now both pigs in unison. "Oh, yes, or at least severely alter. The dwelling is violating the fire regulations of the Articles 2.2.6, 2.3.2 and 2.4.4 of the Scottish Building Handbook, according to which the external wall cladding, any element of structure that provides support to a protected route of escape, or thermal insulation material situated or exposed to an external wall cavity, or in a cavity formed by external wall cladding, as well as all internal wall linings, should have the European fire classification of A1 or A2, cited the building regulations officer. The 2 little pigs looked at each other. The second little pig started to fully understand the terrible experience of the first little pig. It stared its sibling deep in the eyes and whispered, "Run!" And both piglets stormed out of the back door and a little later found themselves in the living room of their oldest sibling. Sobbing and shaking, they retold the story and warned the oldest pig. But the third little pig was not afraid. "Do not worry, I built my house all in stone, and it's stable and fireproof. I do not even fear the wolf in here, much less some government official," it declared confidently. And after half an hour, when nothing had happened and no building regulations officer had shown up, the 2 other piglets were reassured as well, and they all started playing cards. It was already getting dark when suddenly they heard a knock on the door. The first little pig froze in its tracks and looked terrified. The second little pig started sobbing again, and the third little pig opened the door to encounter the building regulations officer. "Good evening. Aren't you a little cold in there, perhaps?" he asked. "No, why?" The oldest pig was startled. "Oh, I just thought because your house is entirely made of stone and every building must be designed and constructed in such a way that an insulation envelope is provided which reduces heat loss. But I take it you ensured the area weighted average U value for all elements of the wall does not exceed 0.22 watt per square meter Kelvin? Because if not, your dwelling would violate Article 6.2.1 of the Scottish Building Handbook." The little pig said nothing. It didn't know anything to say either. In all fairness, it hadn't even understood what the man wanted. The building regulations officer noticed the puzzled look on the piglet's face, produced a fake smile and asked, "Do you mind if I perform some measurements?" But that was too much for the first little pig. Looking neither left nor right, and nearly pushing the building regulations officer to the ground, it stormed out of the building, and its two siblings followed nearly as quickly. The three little pigs were defeated. They had lost their treasured homes, and all only because they had never studied the law. They sat together all the rest of the night in a 24-hour coffee shop, drinking hot chocolate. And as it sometimes happens, when you are at a low point in life, but you have trusted people at your side and your belly full of hot chocolate, they didn't give up, but instead, that night, made the plan to become certified house builders and to build their own home that would fulfill every standard. And so they did. They spent the next years at university studying engineering and architecture and design, and just the right amount of law. After 5 years, they found themselves with a master's degree and all the knowledge and skills to build excellent houses, and a crippling debt from their student loans. So they continued to live in a small flat, living mostly off straw and water, and saving every penny to pay off the debt and save some money to finally build their dream home. They wanted a neat 4-bedroom house with a terrace and a balcony, a spacious kitchen, and all built to passive house standards. And finally, after another 5 years, they were able to afford it in Romania. And they built their dream house in the fantastic landscape of the Carpathian Mountains, and they lived happily ever after. Until one day they heard a knock on the door. "Who's there?" asked the oldest pig. "The building regulations officer," the three little pigs heard from outside. But now they were very confident that their house fulfilled every standard, and they opened the door without hesitation. They didn't even stop for a second to wonder, are there building regulation officers in Romania? Or aren't there wolves in this region? But they should have, because it was indeed not the building regulations officer in front of the door, but the wolf, and he ate all of them before they could even say disproportionate collapse. And that was the end of the three little pigs and of this story. And the moral here is, you can know all the regulations and follow all the rules, but sometimes you just need to apply common sense. The end.